Hey guys, Edre here, and today I'm going to be doing a brand new album review. I'm going to be reviewing the new Taylor Swift album, the new surprise Taylor Swift album, Evermore. It's only been a handful of months since Folklore came out. An album that, in my opinion, I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, I thought it was an alright, average album. I simply just do not understand the amount of overhyping and overrating I've seen Folklore receive. I mean, I get it that in comparison to many of her previous projects, I mean, the album is relatively good, and I didn't have anything strongly against the album. But the amount in which I have seen people praise Folklore and really say it's one of the best albums of the year, to the point where people are saying it's a top 10 album of the entire year, it's beyond me, because what Taylor Swift did on Folklore, to me, was her playing off of the atmospheric, indie, kind of folky sound that artists like Phoebe Bridgers and Fen Lily have been doing much better in this year alone. So, quite frankly, I just thought that the hype for Folklore was way overdone. I don't think it was nearly as deserved as people are saying it is. I didn't hate the album. I didn't even dislike the album. I gave it a 6 out of 10. I was relatively indifferent on it. So, going into this album, which was a surprise one, I kind of expected more of the same. And to be fair, even Taylor Swift said it was sort of like the sister album to Folklore. And oh boy, was she not wrong. You know, the first thing that stuck out to me was that it continues with the very minimalist, atmospheric, folky, indie sound that made Folklore as popular as it was. And once again, I might as well reiterate it again. You know, it's hard for me to take I take everything she does with a grain of salt, because Taylor Swift at this point has sort of been notorious for changing her sound every few albums to whatever is sort of in and popular at the moment. And even if these songs are written from a very personal, introspective place, which I could tell a lot of them are, stylistically, it's just another example of her either consciously or subconsciously just hopping on the bandwagon of whatever musical trends are in right now. And right now, artists like Phoebe Bridgers and some of the more indie, atmospheric, folky stuff is kind of in. And it's no surprise that she would have done this. And honestly, because Folklore was so well received, it's not even shocking to me that she would drop another album of the almost the same exact material just a few months later. You know, this opens up with the song Willow, and I don't usually go into every single song on an album, but I always like talking about the opening track, because that's always the first song you're introduced to. Willow, I admit, has pretty solid acoustic guitar work. I don't have anything against the actual instrumentation or the music of it. But the song itself, I feel like at the core of the song, it falls a little short in my opinion. It didn't leave too much of a lasting impact or anything that memorable. It does seem to be a relatively alright opener, a good little preview of what was to come on the album. But it just didn't lead anywhere interesting, and I don't think when you boil a song down that it's really that interesting of a track. And then, not long after that, you get Champagne Promises, which could easily be reworked into, like I said, a Phoebe Bridgers song. But not that great of a Phoebe Bridgers song. If you made this into a Phoebe song, it would have been a very average song on her album, on her great album Punisher, which came out this year. And this is a trend that comes up time and time and time again. A lot of these songs, if they were done by other artists that are in this style of music, this more atmospheric, kind of folky, kind of very ethereal, indie out there, you know, they would be average songs. These would be considered filler by, you know, a lot of other artists. But I feel like because it's Taylor Swift, it's going to get a lot of praise just because it's Taylor Swift. And instrumentally, there is a bit more risk-taking on this album every now and then. You know, as you get a song like Gold Rush, which seems a bit more risky than anything on Folklore. It seems to have a driving beat to it. And overall, I think Gold Rush was an alright track. Didn't blow me away, but I just think overall there was a bit more risk-taking on this album in terms of the instrumentation, but not enough to really make it stand out as some excellent album. So, yeah. And then we get probably one of my least favorite songs on the album. So, you know, songs like Nobody, No Crime. Sees Taylor Swift really fall back on a lot of the country tropes and cliches that she built her career off of in the first place. But it ends up just becoming one of the most uninspiring and most not creative songs on this album. This is like Taylor Swift by the books. And Dorothea is another one. Follows through with the same exact issue. It's just Taylor Swift by the books. You know, her usual country sound without anything new and fresh added to it. Which is why I find it funny, because already reviews are coming out saying this is a really innovative project when you have songs like this on there. The album is loaded with minimalist tracks as well throughout it. Very minimal arrangements, almost a lot of times just straight up piano or just guitar or synth. And it's not bad. I think some of them are very pretty. They're very luscious sounding, and the overall synth pads I don't have too much of an issue with. And the overall arrangements I thought were put together quite well. But once again, when you boil these songs down, I mean, to the core of them, they're average tracks. I mean, these are filler tracks. I don't care how you put it. These are filler tracks. I mean, they might sound pretty, but at the end of the day, the actual songs themselves strip away the production, and they are about as boring as can be. And they don't leave much of an impact at all. And songs like Tolerate It and Happiness are some of the quintessential songs on here that I think are just filler that sounds pretty, it's produced nicely, it's arranged nicely, but the actual song themselves are far from great. However, every now and then, you do get a song, like Long Story Short, that sticks out as being a highlight to me. You know, it may be a bit more poppy, it might be a bit more accessible, but I do think that a song like, you know, Long Story Short does show a bit more artistic arrangements and a bit more well-focused and well-written tracks that don't come across as filler. They come across as just genuinely alright songs. So I do give her credit. It's not like everything on here is completely forgettable. There is a few songs here and there that I do think leave somewhat of an impact. Lyrically, there isn't much to talk about here. And the reason there's not much to talk about here is because I don't have anything unique to talk about Evermore compared to what was on Folklore. I mean, this is a continuation of Folklore, almost completely. The personal lyrics, they're well written to an extent. I don't hate them. I also don't love them. Just like how I was on Folklore. I don't have anything really unique to say about the writing on this album that I didn't already say in my Folklore review. And with that being said, overall, considering my initial reception of Folklore was relatively lukewarm and it hasn't changed that much, an album full of Folklore leftovers, such as Evermore, and they don't really seem to do anything different. I mean, I have no strong feelings about this album either way. I mean, this is a very bland album it's essentially just a continuation of an album that I already had mixed feelings on, that I already was indifferent on. And none of these songs seem to take it above and beyond. None of these songs seem to fix or improve upon any of the issues I had with Folklore. They just seem to continue with more and more of the same. And the last point I'm going to make, once again, is I take everything Taylor Swift does with a giant grain of salt. Because it seems like every few albums she adjusts her sound to whatever's in and whatever's hip and whatever's popular. And whatever she deems as being successful for her career. And if Folklore wasn't a huge success, this album simply wouldn't exist. So I always take that into consideration when I'm doing my reviews, the overall grand scheme of things, the overall perspective and the role of an album in an artist's discography. And I really just think that right now she's going through her kind of indie atmospheric phase, and I don't know. I just personally don't think it sounds nearly as authentic as several other artists who are a bit smaller that are doing similar things. So, yeah, I was left really indifferent on this album. It wasn't great. I didn't think it was even that good of an album, but I also didn't think it was bad. I mean, for the most part, it's just Folklore 2. I mean, what else can I say? I have settled on giving Evermore decent 5 out of 10. Anybody that doesn't know my reviews needs to know anything above a 5 is good, anything below a 5 is negative. And also, this is just my opinion. I am not a professional reviewer, so don't take anything I say that seriously. Take everything I say with a giant grain of salt as well. Because at the end of the day, I'm just some young dude who's trying to do some YouTube videos because I like listening to music. Nothing I say should be taken seriously. With that being said, I didn't think Taylor Swift did anything to improve upon Folklore's flaws, in my opinion, and just left me feeling indifferent. So yeah, the unneeded Taylor Swift album Evermore, I give a moderate, very average, decent 5 out of 10. What can I say? Goodbye.